Pokemon is a franchise that has always possessed a degree of magic. Everyone remembers their first generation fondly, which for me was Generation 3. Ruby to be specific, and every generation since, I've played and enjoyed every mainline Pokemon game, but just nothing really has hit the highs of Generation 3 and 4. I've just been searching for that feeling of childlike wonder and coming up short. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed my time playing all the mainline Pokemon games, but I just think I must have outgrown the series. Well, at least I thought that, until Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. The 9th generation of Pokemon gave me something I'd missed dearly in the other generations. That sense of childlike wonder. Don't get me wrong, these games are far from perfect, but they managed to evoke that joy in me. And I'd like to share why these games feel so special in spite of it all. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my Pokemon Scarlet and Violet video. Let's go back in time for a bit to February 27, 2022. With a new Pokemon Day came a new Pokemon Presents. Now, just a few months ago, the Gen 4 remakes of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl were released, and the announcements, they were all pretty par for the course. Pokemon Masters news, some Unite stuff, and of course, Cafe Remix. Then, at the very end, they announce it. Now, while this was a few years ago and I may not remember it well, thanks to the handy dandy feature on YouTube, I can see the live chat reaction. And, I mean, come on, what can I say? People were excited. And to top it off, they showed us the starters. The Weed Cat, of course, was my personal favorite at the time, but we will discuss which one ended up becoming my favorite. Speculation ran rampant, and people were just having so much fun talking about what the different evolutions might look like, and it was just such an interesting wait for the game. Now, I was debating on whether or not it would be worth it, and during that time, they showed off the new box legendaries. I love Miraidon. As the games got closer to release, they gradually showed off more and more. From the open world, to terrestrialization, to the Paradox Pokemon. I mean, the hype was building up. And while Sword and Shield were mediocre on release and were annoying for being so hand-holdy, the DLCs got better and better with each release. It seemed that they finally learned that lesson from the release of Sword and Shield, and it didn't seem that that damn tree would be anywhere to be seen. Finally, the games come out and Oh. Oh no. Oh no. Yeah, so it was pretty bad. I mean, there were performance issues, glitches, the whole nine. The games also looked horrible. Yeah, like really, really bad. It's hard to imagine that this and Breath of the Wild are on the same hardware. And with that, let's just get right into it. And I want to start by talking about the bad stuff first. So let's talk about the things that Generation 9 does poorly. The first thing that I want to get out of the way is the graphics. I mean, the game, it looks horrible. Like, look at this. Versus this. I mean, it's night and day. I think that it's due to a number of things. Firstly, the art styles. I mean, Scarlet and Violet aren't exactly taking home any art direction awards. And I don't want it to seem like it's all bad. The Pokemon models themselves look pretty fine in my opinion, and some look the best that they've ever looked. I mean, for example, with Scissor, the new materials and the lighting, he looks great. He looks great. But, I mean, the rest of this game just did not get that same kind of attention to detail that the models did. I mean, you can just go to Lavencia and see that, which is a shame because the graphics are like the one thing that's just really easy to look at and just make a snap judgment about. Another thing that's absolutely abysmal is the performance, specifically on the Switch 1. Look, I get it. The Switch as a console has worse specs than some phones, but the game is just poorly optimized even by those standards. There's constant pop-in, frame drops. I mean, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It sucks. Bad. Remember that tree? Well, what if every tree was that tree? Do you think they maybe did it out of spite? Like, in a board meeting, somebody was like, they say we can't make trees that look good. Oh yeah? Well, if we can't make trees that look good, let's just make them all awful. Sorry, where was I? Oh, yeah, the performance. It's bad. But you know what's not bad? The sponsor of today's video. No one. You think I managed to get sponsored? I have like 23 subscribers. That being said, subscribe, please. I don't really have a pitch for this, but you know, bigger number make brain happy, and if you subscribe, maybe I'll be more motivated to make videos or other things like this. Anyways, back to the video. We've already talked about the poor performance and the graphics, which are things that I feel the Switch 2 remedies a bit, but let's just move on to something a bit more subjective, a bit more baked into the actual DNA. The layout of the open world and the lack of interesting places is something that really, really bummed me out. Like, there aren't really any places that felt very inspired, at least in the base game. And while I've never personally been to Spain, I don't imagine it has like these perfectly sectioned off areas where the environment suddenly changes. Like, it just kind of feels like they had a checklist of environments to include in Paldea, and they didn't really think about how these types of areas would exist in the real world. To give you an example of what I'm talking about, on the western side of the map, there's a pretty small desert area, and immediately to the north is a vibrant grassland surrounding a lake. It just doesn't seem right, especially when they have another desert area on the east side that, well, maybe not perfectly, flows a bit better out of itself to more believable areas. I don't know, like I said, this is a bit more of a subjective gripe that I have with Paldea. Speaking of weird issues that I have with the Paldea region, I go back and forth on this one with my feelings, but the Pokemon centers, they just seem a bit weird. Like, there's just two people standing in what is basically just a kiosk, just kind of waiting for trainers to come along. Like when they were buildings, it felt a bit more like, oh, this is where they worked, like a nurse in a hospital. But with these, it just feels like they're just like imprisoned in a small box somewhere, just kind of waiting for their purpose to be fulfilled so that they can pass on into the next life. And I mean, one of them is just a machine, so that kind of makes more sense. But the mart worker and nurse, I don't know, it feels weird. And to be fair, I feel even more strongly about that. I think it's even more weird in Kitakami, but we will talk about that later. Now, for the sake of the video, I want to talk about something else that I have a bit more to say about, and that is the opening. Not the opening cinematic, or even really up until the first Nemona fight, it's all of it. The intro feels pretty solid as far as Pokemon games are concerned until right after you pick your starter. Firstly, the battle with Nemona. There isn't really anything wrong with the fight itself. In fact, the fight is a personal highlight because you can see that they learned from Hop in Generation 8 by making Nemona a more interesting character. And just aside from that one line about type effectiveness, I don't think she really harps on it after that because she knows that you know the type matchup. My biggest issue is just the fight location. This is kind of coming back to the graphics bad argument I had earlier, but it just, I don't know, it just feels weird. Like they're clearly trying to do some visual storytelling, which is nice. I like it, but I mean, this beach is just desolate. Like it feels like they just didn't want to play to their strengths in this fight visually. And I wish I could say that this is the low point of the tutorial, but it is far from it. After the catching tutorial, you can get a bit of a feel for the open world, which is pretty neat, I like it, but immediately after that, you hear a cry and run to a nearby cliff and... Yeah, the cutscenes, they're not good. I would go as far as to say that they're lazy sometimes. Like they'll have this cutscene and then shortly after they do a pre-rendered cutscene that actually doesn't look bad. The issue is that they really lean on these in-game cinematics, which are so rigid because these characters have so few animations. Another great example of this is the cutscene with Nemona at the top of the lighthouse. Like, look at this and tell me Game Freak did not somehow know that their game looked terrible. To be fair, this is the end of where the tutorial is really bad, but it is truly awful. Following the tutorial is the story, or at least two of the stories. The Gym Challenge and the Team Star stories are bad. I think that's actually kind of a bit unfair to the Gym Challenge storyline since there just really isn't much there, which is my biggest complaint about it, is that it just feels too much like generic Pokemon I want to be the very best like no one ever was. Which is fine, I mean, like I just wish they tried more with it. The Starfall Street, on the other hand, was just, it was pretty bad. Like, it was so obvious from the beginning who the leader of Team Star is. And the tragic backstory of the characters in Team Star is just, I don't know, it's just kind of whatever. It didn't hook me at all, and the minigame you play before the boss fight is just the most boring activity in the game. It also gave no real rewards, like you got LP that Penny stole. Oh, yeah, she's the leader of Team Star, by the way. And the only actual criminal in this game that I'm aware of, she was hacking and stealing funds from the Pokemon League, but since this is actively the worst story, do you want to guess how she gets punished? Go ahead, leave a comment. I'll wait. Yeah, they offer her a job once she graduates. Yep. The actual criminal, she just got offered a job instead of getting punished in any way for straight up theft. So the Team Star story sucks. The only good part is the new character, Clive. That's it. Hey, since I don't know how to transition to the next part of the video, let's just take a break for a moment. And you know what? While we're here, why don't you leave a like on the video if you think I'm doing a good job? Also, feel free to drop any feedback in the comments. I'll be sure to read it. Was that a long enough break? Yeah? Good. All right, let's talk about the good parts of the game. Scarlet and Violet have sparks of brilliance hidden behind all the things that we just talked about. And the best example of that is the third storyline. Arven's personal story is closely tied to the overall plot of the game. And it's actually a pretty compelling story. When the game gives you the 3 quest lines, it positions Arven's as just a fun culinary expedition to find some rare herbs to make some bomb sandwiches. Bomb? Do people even say that anymore? What do I need to say to be relevant? Based? Ohio? What am I? So you go with Arven to make some based sandwiches, and the game alludes to Arven having ulterior motives, which is interesting. What's he doing? Why is he being so secretive? Well, it's answered in the next cutscene with him. See, he's got a dog that's fallen terribly ill after something happened to it, and turns out Arven has a really soft spot for his dog. And honestly, that's awesome. He's a relatable character, a boy who's trying his best to help his sick dog. And after that, Arven becomes a pretty cool guy. The story continues on, and Arven eventually gets his dog better with the Herba Mystica. But that's what they're called, by the way, Herba Mystica, or HM for short. And they also make your ride Pokemon more versatile, letting you access new areas of the map. Kind of a cute little nod to the old HMs in the older games, which is nice. Also, Arven and the Criminal both have some pretty cool teams that reflect who they are as people. For example, the Criminal only has Evolutions, which she has an Eevee backpack on, so that tracks. Arven's team is comprised of his dog and Pokemon related to food. Like, when you battle the Titan Pokemon with him, he always has a little food-related pun ready to go, which I like to imagine while he's waiting for you to battle the Titan, he's just sitting there coming up with the best pun he can think of. Like, he drops a one-liner and then the music just takes off. Speaking of the music, let me gush about that for a bit. Real talk, as I've been writing the script for this, I have been listening to the game's soundtrack on that goofy little Nintendo music app that just kind of dropped out of nowhere. And there are so many good tracks. I've also been playing Pokemon music in the background of this video so far. The music is just pure heat. I mean, each track conveys so much about the moment or area. It's honestly just so nice. Like, just listen to this. It's the theme for the snowy mountain area in the game. There's a certain serenity to walking alone in the snow. I mean, with nothing but the beautiful flakes coming down, and the music really evokes that emotion. But then there comes a certain determination to the music. There's a lot that goes into hiking up a mountain, and I feel like this song really captures that feeling. And well, it may have the worst story in the game. I mean, the Team Star boss music is just so good. Like, This is hype. And it should be. I mean, you're fighting the leader of a gang in front of their gang while they're on a freaking car that you also have to fight. And to top it all off, that guy on the car, yeah, him, he made it. This music is playing in-game because in the Paldea region, that guy made a hype song for him and his friends. I hope you're starting to see why I said these games just had so much potential. That's cool. But above all other tracks, there's this one. This song, it's just... I haven't really talked about this much on the channel yet, but I love Nier. Both Automata and the remake of the original's replicant version, whatever. Part of what I love in those games is their music. There's mystique, a beauty in the desolation, some solace in the destruction. A very bittersweet emotion wells up in me when I hear specifically, let's talk about the song Snow in Summer. You see, the thing about Snow in Summer is that it conveys a lot of emotion. It's just such a hauntingly beautiful piece. A boy and his sick sister are fighting for their survival in an old, abandoned convenience store with snow swirling around. But it's the middle of summer, a time where the world should be so full of life, and yet it's snowing and dead. Surrounded by a gray, unfeeling, desolate city, a boy and his sister would meet their end. The Nier games are filled with things like this, but I feel this is the best song to represent that. So why bring up this Nier tangent? Well, that's how this song makes me feel. This song for Area Zero is just the best song, the crown jewel in the crowning achievement of Paldea Area Zero. And then there's Sorry, where was I? Oh, right. Once you progress through the 3 quests, you learn that the professor is trapped in Area Zero and go with your friends to help them out. When you land in Area Zero, it's quite the experience. You see, Paldea has a giant crater in its center, which is essentially off limits to anyone unless the Pokemon League grants you permission. The reason for that is because it's just an ecological phenomenon. Like, there are tons of Pokemon inhabiting the crater that are unique to here or otherwise hard to find. This is also where the Paradox Pokemon are from. Well, sort of, but we'll touch on that a bit later. There's just so much going on in Area Zero, it's actually hard to unpack all of it. So let's just start with the story, or rather the conclusion of the main story of the game. As you descend further and further into the crater, you start running into more Paradox Pokemon, and even your ride Pokemon refuses to come out. Once you go through some caves, you come face to face with the Zero Lab. It's where the professor has been beckoning you this whole time. Once you reach the door, you learn why your ride Pokemon has been a little skittish. And that's because they aren't the only one of their kind. And they actually lost a fight against the other. After a few quick battles, your friends and the criminal hold off the Paradox Pokemon sieging you and go inside, where you finally come face to face with the professor. They've been guiding you here this whole time, but something hasn't been quite right with our dearest professor. It is here that they reveal that they aren't, in fact, the real professor, but instead an advanced android modeled after the professor in both body and mind. The professor founded the Zero Lab based off of the book that they've been obsessed with since they were a child. For Sada, it's the Scarlet book, and for Turo, it's the Violet book. These books tell fantastical tales of a research team who first went into Area Zero and their discoveries. The professor read this book when they were younger and began to wonder about the secrets of Area Zero, what it was, what it may hold. Eventually, when they grew up, they became researchers and got access to Area Zero. And what they found was truly astonishing. They found the Terra Crystals, these crystals that have the power to change the type of your Pokemon. But it's been speculated by the community that the power they hold is actually the power to reshape reality to what the holder wishes. The reason you can change your Pokemon to a different type is because you can harness the power of the crystal and imagine it as a different type. Well, by this theory, the professor created what they believed to be a time machine and used it to pull Pokemon from across time, or at least that's what they thought. I think that it's more than likely that they manifested what they believe to be ancient or future Pokemon based off of Pokemon found in the real world around them, as well as the researchers that originally descended into the Area Zero. Back then, the team only saw a very small amount of Paradox Pokemon, and I think that that's due to that, just some of them speculating what could be down here and imagining it. But once they had manifested the one and published their findings, the professor found the book, and that resulted in them becoming convinced in the existence of these paradoxes, thus being able to create even more of them, since they were both in proximity to more of the Terra Crystals, and they had a stronger belief of the Paradox Pokemon. Sorry, I got sidetracked, but that just goes to show what I'm talking about. This game has such strong writing and world building when it comes to Area Zero that I wonder if the same teams worked on the rest of the game. So to come back to the story at hand, we learn that the professor died from their injuries after trying to prevent the two big lizards from fighting. Now, forced to continue the professor's work, the AI professor grew weary of its task. It didn't see the point of the work, especially if it had gotten the original professor killed. So it monitored Paldea, following the strongest trainers. Ultimately, it called out to us to fix the professor's mistakes and right their wrongs. It wanted us to shut down the time machine, and so we do. Using the professor's prized possession as a key, we turn the time machine off. But there's one last obstacle. Despite the AI professor wanting the research to end and the time machine to go offline forever, it just couldn't resist its programming. It was built to continue the professor's research. And so, one last failsafe kicks in: the Paradise Protection Protocol. It's a really, really good final boss fight, with the professor using a team of Paradox Pokemon and Master Balls, and of course, at the very end, hitting you with the Lizard Ditto matchup. There's so much more that I could talk about with this ending, but I just hope that I could convey some of it and do it justice. The writing is absolute peak for Pokemon standards. The storytelling through gameplay alone is awesome, and I'm gonna be honest, I get excited each time I go through it, and anytime I get to go back to Area Zero, I think about that twist. Now, something that I touched on briefly while I was gushing about Area Zero is that Area Zero is where Terra Crystals came from. Terrestrialization, or Terra for short, is the gimmick of this generation, and it allows you to change your Pokemon's type, which I find to be a really interesting mechanic. It's typically used more as a defensive tool, but can increase offensive capabilities as well. I think it's more interesting and a more compelling gimmick than Dynamaxing, though I should say I'm not a competitive player. I just kind of watch Wolf Glick's videos, so take my opinions of the state of competitive Pokemon as one of an outsider. Now, as a pure spectator, I have really enjoyed the competitive formats this generation. And I think the main reason why I like it so much is that the Terras add so much mind gaming to the whole process. Like, just as an example, and this is going to be a very poorly explained tangent with my own understanding of the metagame as a base point. So if I get some things wrong or just don't explain it that well, let's just agree that there's a reason that I have 0 tournament results. So, all right, let's say that I have an Amoonguss with Spore and Rage Powder and an Incineroar with Fake Out and Flare Blitz against my opponent who has an Incineroar and a Primarina. The Primarina has Protect and Hydro Pump while the Incineroar has Knockoff and Flare Blitz. In this turn, I want to hit one of my 2 opponents with Spore to put it to sleep. Now, without Terra as a gimmick, I can kind of click my target and let it fly. But with Terra, it means I need to consider my options more. Let's say that Primarina is Terra Fairy and Incineroar is Terra Grass. That makes things much more interesting since grass types are, by nature, immune to Spore. You may think that my opponent has an easy way out of my Spore this turn by terrestrializing Incin and protecting the Primarina. But by changing their Incineroar to a grass type, they've become much weaker to my own Incineroar's Flare Blitz. If they're able to correctly guess my Spore target and act accordingly, they may be able to take a KO. But they may also take an unfavorable trade as a result. There's even more to consider in this one position alone, like what if instead of clicking Spore, I wanted to click Rage Powder? Now they have even more to consider. This isn't a perfect scenario, by the way, but it just shows the kind of standoff that you can get into with Terra on the table. Now, consider a whole team of varying Terra types and different combination of moves, and you'll start to see just how much more interesting the game can get. All in all, Scarlet and Violet are some of my favorite experiences with Pokemon in a long time. They managed to capture that childlike wonder that I had when I played Ruby for the first time. And I just... Yeah, What do you mean there's more? DLC? You won't let my family go if I don't talk about it? My glasses are... Hey, wait, that's just too far. Fine, I'll talk about it. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet got 2 DLC drops in the form of the Teal Mask and the Indigo Disc, which follow one story called The Hidden Treasure of Area Zero.
Oh yeah, more Area Zero.
Let's start at the start of the DLC with the Teal Mask. The Teal Mask takes us from the Paldea region all the way across the world to Kitakami, which is a pretty cool destination, all things considered. The layout of the map makes much more sense over the original Paldea map. Areas just flow much better into one another. I feel like they knew that Paldea was kind of a strange map in terms of layout, and so they wanted to construct a more focused and interesting map with more interesting locales than that of the base game. The Teal Mask also introduced new characters and Pokemon. And for the new characters, they introduced 2, Kieran and Carmine. Carmine feels a lot like Clara from Pokemon Sword in the best ways possible. She's so expressive and over the top in just all the right ways. And Kieran is a pretty funny kid who has a lot of insecurities and says things like, "Wowzers." Both are honestly really good to have on screen, and I didn't dislike either one. Kieran has actually a pretty interesting character arc about wanting to be acknowledged by his favorite Pokemon, and when we, the protagonist and therefore de facto hero of the story, are instead, he starts to resent us and our ability to do what he could not. Carmine is not nearly as complex as their little brother. She stays pretty much the same throughout the whole time. She falls into that tsundere trope a bit at the beginning, but as she opens up a bit, you realize that she's a worried older sister, and their dynamic is pretty good. I like it. As for new Pokemon introduced, I like them, from Blood Moon Ursaluna to Sinistra to her. Ogerpon is awesome in every way. She's a grass type when in her regular teal mask form, but she can change her mask to change her secondary typing and Terra type between fire, water, and rock. Mechanically speaking, she's an interesting legendary, but the real reason she was instantly beloved by the community is her expressiveness and backstory. Throughout the DLC, we learned that she was effectively blamed for being a terrorist when in reality the Loyal Three legendaries also introduced in the DLC, were the real bad guys. That's the TLDR of this DLC, by the way. She's completely innocent, but the people don't see it that way, and as a result, she's been forced to live up on the mountain in solitude. Kieran was really the only person who believed in the ogre originally, but after everybody starts to realize the lies that they've been told about Ogerpon, they all change their mind, and we're Ogerpon fans. Ogerpon acknowledges us instead of Kieran, and thus starts his descent into madness. And that is where the Teal Mask concludes, with Kieran and Carmine going back to Blueberry Academy while we continue vacationing in Kitakami. There's plenty to do in Kitakami, but it does certainly feel a bit odd that we went on a trip to study only to fly to and from Kitakami as we wish. Like, are we supposed to be students at an actual school? I don't know. I'm not gonna complain. I'm just gonna enjoy it. Now, while we were traipsing around in Kitakami, disregarding our obligations to our school, Kieran was getting busy. After a while, we get an invitation from the director of Blueberry Academy to visit the school as an almost foreign exchange student who is allowed to go back home whenever they want and can also just go on vacation whenever they want. Bit weird, but you know. The Indigo Disc is a great piece of content bogged down by one major tedious grind. I really like the DLC overall. The locations are varied, and while it is like a bit odd in terms of layout, it has a reason for being the way that it is, so I think I can give it a pass. The new Pokemon introduced are all interesting in their own ways, and while there's nothing as cool as her, they all have something going on. Terrapagos is a cute little guy, except you don't really get to play with him in his cute little guy form since he takes on a different form during battle and another while Terra'd. He does bring with him a new type, however, that is exclusive to Terra. It's called the Stellar type, which is a unique but a bit obtuse type. I can only vaguely explain the type interactions, but here's what I understand. So to start with, it's Terra type with only offensive interactions. It has no defensive interactions. What I mean by that is if you Terra your Chen-Pal to Stellar, defensively it's still an Ice Dark type, with changes of the offensive relationships you have. It powers up the moves of each type, but only the first time you use a move from that type, and then it doesn't. So like, if you use Ice Spinner, it gets powered up, but then the next time you use an Ice type move, including Ice Spinner, it just stays at its regular power, so weird. Stellar type moves are also super effective to any Pokemon that is Terra, regardless of type, but there aren't really any Stellar moves in the game unless you Terra. It's a weird type, and I'm not entirely sure if it's a good addition or not, since it really dies with Terra and when the next generation comes out. But as for the characters of the DLC, they're fine. Like Carmine and Kieran are back, and they're still cool. And Lacey and Drayton are all right, but Crispin and Amorous are, they're just not very interesting to me. I do like that all the trainer battles are doubles, which makes it a bit more interesting from a gameplay standpoint. What I really strongly dislike are the BBQs, or more specifically their economy. You just get so few points from BBQs while needing to amass 3,000 just to upgrade one of the 4 areas, which you're gonna want to do since they let you catch the starters from all the previous games. As somebody who has completed both the Kitakami and Paldean Pokedexes, I just have yet to complete the Blueberry Dex purely because I have not accumulated the points from doing menial tasks throughout the academy. I don't know why this grind bothers me the way that it does. Like, I'm fine with shiny hunting and doing Professor Oak challenges. Like, I'm not averse to grinding, but for some reason this grind just can't motivate me to finish it, which is sad since, like, I don't think it's a bad idea or anything. I just think that the tasks that they give you are so poorly done that they're just not worth enough. But with that said, I've had even more fun in Blueberry than I did in either Paldea or Kitakami. So you might notice the mic quality difference. That's because I forgot to click record on my camera when I originally did this take, and so I am doing this in the editing booth. It's going to make it a little bit awkward, but that's okay. So, to conclude this story, after beating the Elite Four and taking on Kieran as champion and taking his place on the throne, you and a few of the Blueberry students are invited to go with Briar to Area 0. And actually the Zero Lab, where you're able to access a deeper part of Area 0. This is where you find your first Stellar Terra Pokemon, as well as the Pokemon synonymous with terrestrialization, Terrapagos. After meeting the little turtle, Kieran immediately tries to one-up you once again and pull that slumbering turtle from the crystal. Kieran then throws a Master Ball and catches the little guy, immediately turning to face us to battle. Of course, we oblige, and as usual, we proceed to dumpster him. Then, in his last act of defiance, Kieran Terra's Terrapagos, causing its Terra energy to go wild and sending it into this enraged state, which not even Kieran can control. It does put up quite the effort, but we manage to subdue the beast, and as a result, we are able to catch Terrapagos. During the course of the battle, Kieran reflects on his ways and ultimately returns back to his normal self. I like the arc that he goes through during the course of the DLCs, and I think he does really well as a villain during the Indigo Disc. But after you make up and the credits roll, you can get Briar's book and venture to the Crystal Lake in Kitakami, a lake said to be able to communicate and summon spirits of the dead. If you do, using Terrapagos' power, you're able to communicate with a younger version of the professor. After conversing with them for a bit, they offer you a trade, Briar's book for their book. After receiving the professor's book, the title screen changes for the final time. See, it's touches like this that really go to show that the people that make these games still have the ability to make those magical moments happen. There's just one thing left to do, and that's to wrap up all the storylines at once in the epilogue, Mochi Mayhem. Mochi Mayhem starts when we link to the internet and receive the mythical Pecha Berry and head to the mart in Kitakami. After interacting with the plush on display, we're called by our original friends, dubbed the Zero Crew, back to our home. After hanging out with our friends for a little bit, we get a letter from Kieran asking for us to come back to Kitakami, and this time we bring the Zero Crew along. After getting to Kitakami, we link up with Kieran and learn that Carmine has been acting just a little strange. Weird. Anyways, we head back up to the hotel and play hide and seek with the remote, but then Nimona ends up getting entangled in the strange behavior, and before long we see the whole town ended up like this. After doing some quick battles, we meet back up with Arvin and the criminal, where we are attacked by the Pokemon that is putting everyone under its spell. We and Kieran know better than to eat the mochi, but Arvin and the criminal aren't so lucky and end up becoming thrall to this Pokemon. After styling on those two with Kieran, we give chase to the Pokemon and corner it at the Loyalty Square, where we have one final face-off against the possessed Nemona. After besting Nemona, we take on the Pecharunt and capture it, ending its reign of terror over this town. After saying our goodbyes and heading back home with the Zero crew, Moji Mayhem comes to an end. I want to say that this is just a great end to Generation 9. The storytelling was nice and the characters and their interactions felt compelling. All in all, much like Sword and Shield, they killed it with the DLCs. And I'd even say that these are better than the Isle of Armor and Crown Tundra. But with that all said, let's wrap this bad boy up. I said in the intro of this video that Pokemon games have a certain unique magic to them that other franchises just aren't able to capture, and part of that is growing up with the games. We all have those games from our childhood that make us feel all nice and fuzzy, and for many people, their first ever Pokemon game really fills that role. But I think that pushing that idea that these games only have that magic because we grew up with them is dishonest and just plain wrong. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, in spite of it all, still has that magic that makes Pokemon games so special. And I did my hardest in this video to explain why I believe that these games, more than any other recent mainline entry, shows that off. With that being said, I want to thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. I've put a lot of time into it, and this is by far the longest script that I've written to date. Let me know if you like the more scripted feel of this video in the comments down below, and subscribe if you want to see me talk way too long about other things that don't matter. Once again, thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.